Verse 3, Chapter 8. Shri Bhagavanuvacha Aksharam Brahma Paramam Swabhavodhyatma Muchyate Bhut Bhavodbhava Karo Visargah Karma Sangitah. In this verse, Shri Krishna says to Arjun, the indestructible, transcendental living entity is called Brahman, and his eternal nature is called Adhyatma, the Self. Action pertaining to the development of the material bodies of the living entities is called karma, or fruitive activities. Elaborating on the above thought, Brahma is indestructible and eternally existing, and its constitution is not changed at any time. But beyond Brahma, there is Para-Brahma. Brahma refers to the living entity, and Para-Brahma refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The constitutional position of the living entity is different from the position he takes in the material world. In material consciousness, his nature is to try to be the Lord of matter. But in spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, his position is to serve the Supreme. When the living entity is in material consciousness, he has to take on various bodies in the material world. That is called karma, or varied creation, by the force of material consciousness. In Vedic literature, the living entity is called Jivatma and Brahma, but he is never called Para-Brahma. The living entity, that is Jivatma, takes different positions. Sometimes he merges into the dark material nature and identifies himself with matter, and sometimes he identifies himself with the superior spiritual nature. Therefore, he is called the Supreme Lord's marginal energy. According to his identification with material or spiritual nature, he receives a material or spiritual body. In material nature, he may take a body from any of the 84 lakh species of life, but in spiritual nature, he has only one body. In material nature, he is manifested sometimes as a man, demigod, animal, beast, bird, etc. according to his karma. To attain material heavenly planets and enjoy their facilities, he sometimes performs sacrifices, that is yajna. But when his merit is exhausted, he returns to earth again in the form of a man. This process is called karma. The Chandogya Upanishad describes the Vedic sacrificial process. On the sacrificial altar, 5 kinds of offerings are made into 5 kinds of fire. The 5 kinds of fire are conceived of as the heavenly planets, clouds, the earth, man and woman, and the 5 kinds of sacrificial offerings are faith, the enjoyer on the moon, rain, grains, and semen. In the process of sacrifice, the living entity makes specific sacrifices to attain specific heavenly planets and consequently reaches them. When the merit of sacrifice is exhausted, the living entity descends to earth in the form of rain, then takes on the form of grains, and the grains are eaten by man and transformed into semen, which impregnates a woman, and thus the living entity once again attains the human form to perform sacrifice and so repeat the same cycle. In this way, the living entity perpetually comes and goes on the material path. The Krishna conscious person, however, avoids such sacrifices. He takes directly to Krishna consciousness and thereby prepares himself to return to Godhead. Impersonalist commentators on the Bhagavad Gita unreasonably assume that Brahma takes the form of Jeev in the material world. And to substantiate this, they refer to chapter 15, verse 7 of the Gita. But in this verse, the Lord also speaks of the living entity as an eternal fragment of myself. The fragment of God, the living entity, may fall down into the material world, but the Supreme Lord, that is Achyut, never falls down. Therefore, this assumption that the Supreme Brahma assumes the form of Jeev is not acceptable. It is important to remember that in Vedic literature, Brahma, the living entity, is distinguished from Parabrahma, the Supreme Lord. Hence, verse 3 of chapter 8 is explained. Jai Shri Krishna. If you like today's video, please do like, share, subscribe and comment on the channel Mystic Faith.